Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. So, what's it like to be acquired by an Austrian private equity group? With me here today is someone who can tell us a little bit about that. Heath Treasure, former owner of Super T Transport. Heath, welcome to the Hot Seat.
How you doing, Spencer? Good to be on the hot seat.
But before we kind of mix things up, just tell us maybe 30 seconds or so, just a little bit about Super T Transport, and then we'll kind of unpack all the things that have happened in the last 6 to 12 months.
Sure. Well, Super T Transfer, I can tell you a little bit of background on myself real quick. I grew up in the truckload transportation space, worked for a small couple hundred truck family operated refrigerated carrier for several years, nearly a decade. They got bought out by a big publicly traded company. And shortly after there, I went on my own. I left the operations team, the operations management team of that company, went out on my own and started Super T Transport. I was Super T Transport's about 15 or 16 years ago, roughly. I was Super T Transport's first truck driver and first billing manager, first safety director, first I've even been known to grease the trucks and oil change the trucks from time to time. I've changed a tire or two, but pretty much started from the ground floor, and we grew our truck line up to a couple hundred plus trucks and several millions of dollars in revenue, and over about a 15-year period of time. And then, like you mentioned, recently got acquired by Berger Logistics, an Austrian-based transportation provider owned by the famous Formula One race car driver Gerhard Berger and Red Bull. So the shareholders of Berger Logistics are Red Bull, the energy drink, and Gerhard Berger there at Berger Logistics.
Well, I think just obviously just a great headline in terms of the intrigue. This was, one of the things that we discussed in our annual report as far as just one of the more fascinating, obviously the brands, the fact that it's an international buyer coming over specific to refrigerated trucking. So all kinds of things to unpack. But let's start at the beginning. We got a little history in terms of, I love getting dirty and doing the things that truckers do. A lot of things had to happen from that beginning to get to the point where you had a highly sellable company. So to tell us about how did you, a relatively short period of time, contextually speaking, but to build a business that was able to attract that type of buyer. Tell us about that.
Look, I'd like to tell you that I've done everything right and I've got the magic recipe and I could tell you exactly how to do it again. I don't even know that I could replicate it and do it again. But I think that, and our intentions of growing the business was to build a good business and really focus on our employees. And in most businesses, they focus on what are they doing to make money. And I think we put at the forefront of that is what can we do to become a good organization for our employees. And then real close behind that was how can we provide a good service to our customers. And, I think if you put your employees and your culture first, you can develop a really good infrastructure that's appealing to everyone. And Spencer, what I've found in this whole process is that people are just as interested in they go do a Q of E and they're just as interested in the quality of earnings and the earnings potential and the historical earnings and everything else of a company. But in this day and age, they're the real buyers, I believe, are just as interested in the quality of your culture, the quality of your operational infrastructure, the Q of O. And I think that's what attracted them to us. Look, the truth be known, they probably didn't need a reefer carrier, right? They could have used a dry van carrier. They just wanted Berger in Austria's dry van. They didn't need a reefer carrier, but the culture was right, and the quality of operations was right, and I think that anybody out there listening to this that wants to try to build their company to get it to a point where they can take it on a silver platter over to to Tenney Group and say, hey, help me find a Berger/Red Bull buyer, the only advice that I would have to them is really focus on your culture and focus on your quality of operations just as much as if not more than the financial aspect of your business.
Yeah, and I think we would probably agree that you can't separate one from the other. I mean, I think the culture is going to affect the financial performance. Is that correct?
It absolutely is. In fact, we're working on some projects right now, Spencer. It's a good question because we have dashboards and dashboards and dashboards to track all the financial metrics of our business, which was another appealing aspect that I think that the buyer had when in talking to us. But we're working on dashboards that measure the quality of our culture and the quality of our operation, and reference that against our monthly performance or our weekly performance and our metrics. And this to me is, every truck line out there that's worth their salts, starting to track dashboards and metrics and key metrics and KPIs. You hear all the things, right? As a company like Tenney Group. But how many of them do you hear are dashboarding and tracking and doing metrics on their quality of operations, and measuring that against their financials? So I guess any potential seller out there, they need to be looking at the forefront and see what is it that's going to make my fleet more appealing than Grandpa's fleet and all the other fleets that are so alike in so many ways. You see that yourself. So many fleets are so alike. What differentiates yourself? And I think if you can differentiate yourself with, tip of the sword technology and advancements and ideas, then you bring on the real attractive buyers like Tenney Group did for us.
So, I have to address this because people are looking at you and they're like, well, this doesn't look like someone who traditionally is exiting the trucking industry. This is a handsome man. He's in his prime. I mean, what would have compelled him to exit? So, can you help us walk through the process as far as why was it that you chose this particular time for you to make a change? What were the influencers around that?
Well, look, I got diesel in my, you've heard the terminology, guys like me that have been in the business their whole life, I've got diesel in my veins. There's no way of taking the diesel fuel out of my veins. But I've always viewed myself as a businessman first and a trucker second. And, as a businessman, I always look at opportunities. I could be a buyer today and a seller tomorrow. And when the buying opportunities are right for us to acquire other truck lines, we need to acquire. And when the selling opportunity is right, we need to sell. And that's more than anything. But also trucking, to the people that are viewing your podcast and thinking about potentially selling their transportation company, especially now because everybody's getting beat up out there right now. But the time to consider selling is when the market's good. And I think they should always be in preparation to sell their fleet, even when they're middle-aged. They should be working with you guys to figure out how they can put a compelling story together in the event that they decide that they need to sell or that they want to sell. You always want to sell when you want to, not when you need to, right? And the business is getting harder, more and more difficult. It's becoming a big, deep pockets game. Everybody's seeing that now where the market's really soft, and it's harder and harder for the smaller 200, 300, 500 truck fleets and smaller. It's smaller for them to slug it out with the big boys. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of consolidation as well.
Well, I think that's a good word right there. So ultimately, obviously, you hired Tenney Group to go execute what you wanted to do. And so, what was it about Tenney Group that ultimately allowed you to feel comfortable locking arms with somebody else to go help run this process for you?
Well, look, Spencer, anybody that knows me knows that I'm as honest as they come, and I always tell it how it is. But I'm going to tell you a story. I used to coach my son's little league game and games. I was a coach for his little league football games, and we would be losing by a long shot at halftime. I remember a game specifically, we were losing by a long shot at halftime, and you're so discouraged in your team, and everything you practice, and you really just want to spit fire, and because you're upset. And then the team comes back at the second half of the halftime, and they end up winning the game. And then all the dads on the sideline who had lost faith in me as a coach and had lost faith in the team said, "Oh yeah, well we knew we could do that. We knew." And so the mentality changes, and that relationship's real similar to my relationship with Tenney Group. Our process was a long, grueling process, and there was a point at halftime where I was wondering what the heck, who had I signed up with? A lot of song and dances. Number one, there's no way to really fully understand how long the process is and how grueling it is until you're in it, right? And but then we get past halftime, and the Tenney Group team shows up with their all-stars and just knocked it over the fence. And so I think it's important to know that because it's a long process, you're going to be going through a lot of these emotional ups and downs. At one point you're going to wonder who the heck you've hired, but and then at other times you're going to think, oh my gosh, I am so glad I have these guys by my side. These guys just saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars in this negotiation process. And so, there was times where I questioned if I had picked the right team, but at the end of the day, when we got to the end of the game, there was no question, no doubt that I had picked the right team to help me transition this company into new ownership, and the decision was the right decision. And you and your team, Spencer, are definitely a group of people that I would recommend to my friends if they were looking to do the same thing.
That means a lot, Heath. And so I want to unpack that a little bit, because some people that have not gone through this process don't fully appreciate the emotional swings of, sometimes it is 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. You're dealing with international buyers. There's a whole next level of complexities between legal, financial, between shifts in the market, shift in risk. So what advice would you give to folks that are going to be getting into this process for the first time, and they have no idea, like, what, in some respects, no matter who they're working with, that like what they might experience? What advice would you give them, and how to manage those emotional swings through a sale process?
I use a lot of analogies with my staff and with my team of people, but if if you're going to go strip down naked in front of a crowd of people, you're going to be very embarrassed if you didn't prepare for that. And so if there's even a chance in your mind that you think you might be a seller over the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you better get your butt in the gym, and you better exercise, because there is no way around stripping down naked in front of these buyers. And so the advice that I would have is, in the trucking business, more often than not, sales are long, drawn-out processes. There can be fast ones, but the right fit, I think, is a long, drawn-out process. And if there's a thought in your mind that you might be a seller one day, I think you better get exercising and get ready to be stripped down naked, because that's the most uncomfortable part, is that if you're stripping down naked and you're not prepared, you're going to take a haircut on valuation. You're going to take a haircut, and by the time it's all said and done, everything you've worked on for your whole life, your retirement, everything you had, is whittled down to almost nothing. On the contrary, if you think that it's a possibility, and you start getting fit financially, and you start making sure there's no operational gaps, you do a really good Q of O operationally, and make sure there's not any cultural holes, and you're able to really display a compelling picture, not only financially but culturally and operationally, then stripping down naked is no problem, right? And that's the best answer that I could probably give for that question, Spencer. I hope I answered it appropriately.
Well, I thank you for that answer, and I also thank you for the headline that you just gave our marketing team for, for this podcast. always full of gems, sir. So thank you for that, and definitely good advice. Um, one of the things that obviously I think people can sense kind of your energy about what's happening in this next chapter, and one of the things that I'm passionate about is like providing. And this is kind of what these videos are about, is providing a sense and a vision for what the next chapter might look like for some business owners who, they've built a great business, but it's pretty much been all consuming, and they haven't had the opportunity to think about, well, if I didn't have to manage this and build this, and if I had some additional bandwidth, what else could I do? So I would love to hear, like, what are you kind of thinking about? You're, I don't know, maybe 10 months from the transaction ish, somewhere in there. Like, what are you thinking about in terms of this? We know that you're working with the buyer, but what else is on your mind in terms of this next chapter of life?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, when you're acquired, you have to work hard from a financial perspective to tax plan and plan for for the estate and plan for retirement and everything else. So there's always a pretty heavy lifting workload in regards to that. But as far as a day-to-day workload, for right now, I've committed to Berger and Red Bull, and I'm poised to help them grow their and fulfill their vision here in the U.S., which is continued acquisitions, not only to haul some of their own products, but just to haul other people's products as well. We haul a number amount of products outside of the Red Bull network. We're a truck line to Red Bull, just like any other truck line. We have to make sure they're happy, but our goal is to grow that truck line. So Spencer, for all of your listeners out there, we're looking to grow. Get a hold of Tenney Group, and they know how to get a hold of us, and we would love to do that. So right now my focus is on that. But long term, Spencer, I don't see myself. Obviously there's, I can't get too deep in the details, but there's certain non-competes, etc., that have to be fulfilled. I'm committed to fulfilling those commitments. But I don't see myself stepping that far away from the supply chain or the truckload transportation, whether it's helping move the chains down the field for Berger and Red Bull or in some other dynamic. I would imagine that's where I'm at. That's the industry that I stay in one way or another.
I love it. I love it. So I got one more question for you, Heath. And again, I thank you so much for just for the time, obviously for the opportunity to serve you. We never take it for granted. Um, But a little bit of a wild card question for you, sir. Now you're a pilot, is that correct,
Yeah,
Heath? So
yeah.
I'm interested. Many of our clients are pilots as well. Many of our future clients would like to be a pilot. So tell us about. I mean, this is kind of a fun fact for those that don't know you. But tell us, how did you become a pilot? And then secondly, what is your most favorite place to fly to?
That's a good question. So I started flying, mostly for recreational purposes. I've always wanted to fly airplanes, but I started flying tailwheel airplanes, a Husky. I've had a couple Husky airplanes, what they call them, and they're the ones with they're backcountry airplanes with the big tires. And I'm a pretty big thrill junkie. I like to, if I can land that thing in a field or on a dirt road or somewhere wild and crazy, that's what I want to do. If somebody else has landed a plane back there, I want to land a plane back there. And so I really got involved in flying the backcountry airplanes, and have progressed into flying multiple different types of airplanes. And I'm just, I'm an aviator, and I love to be in the sky, period. There isn't any one place in the sky that I enjoy more. I like it all. But I guess if I had to really say, there's nothing like flying around the Grand Tetons in one of them backcountry airplanes, or flying over the mountains and looking down and seeing the wildlife, and you're up there all by yourself. Long day in the trucking world really can get erased fast as soon as you get up in the sky and take your head off all the phone rings and the complaints and the broke down trucks out over the road.
I think that's the greatest prescription for the trucking industry that I've heard in quite some time. Well, listen, Heath, No doubts you will fly high in this next chapter of life, doing great things with Berger and their team. And again, I just thank you for allowing Tenney Group to serve you, for taking the time to educate our listeners. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat. We'll see you next time.